So hello to everyone in our audience. We're now live with our next panel, which is covering NFTs 2.0, the next generation of NFTs. I have the pleasure of being joined by two incredibly impressive panelists today, Ohayon and Jay Rosenzweig. So before we kick things off, I'd love it if each of you could go ahead and give us a little bit of information on your background, what you're currently involved with in the space, and maybe tease us on some of the current projects that you're hoping to build out in the next coming months. So Ori, starting with you.
Sure. So, hey guys, my name is Ohayon. I'm president and co-founder of a firm called NFT BAZL, also running corporate development at GDA Capital. Prior to working in crypto and in the NFT space, I was a typical Wall Street guy. My first job out of university was at Goldman Sachs. I was an equity sales trader and also part of the team that starting the Bitcoin trading desk at Goldman about 5 to 6 years ago. Shortly after that, I moved into TD Securities to become a derivatives trader. Also built out a blockchain incubator to attempt to transfer equity trades and settlements on chain. So essentially trying to use the blockchain as a method of transferring data versus a token. Did that for a couple of years. And then when NFTs came out, I saw a massive opportunity in the market, moved over to GDA and started building out NFT BAZL from scratch. And here we are.
Amazing. And Jay, how about yourself?
So Canadian, born and raised, actually born and raised in Montreal. I studied at McGill University where I did a philosophy degree and 2 law degrees, and met a really important mentor in the law school named Erwin Kotler, who's an international human rights champion. He represented people like Nelson Mandela back in the day, and ended up as Canada's Attorney General, Minister of Justice, where he enacted all kinds of progressive laws and freed more people who were wrongfully convicted in 1 year, more than any of the previous ministers combined. And if you fast forward to today, I'm the chair of his international human rights organization, and we are representing the Nelson Mandelas of today. Sadly, there's many of them all around the world, and combating racism and hate wherever it might be found. So one of my buckets would be the philanthropic world. I'm on a number of other philanthropic boards, including Black North and Pandemic of Love, where we raised $60 million for those in need during the pandemic. And When We Band Together, which is a refugee board, we focus on Lesbos, Greece, which is probably the biggest refugee camp in the world. The other bucket I play in is town strategy. I help companies large and small and medium-sized at the top levels of the corporate world to kind of design, build, and attract world-class teams. And in that regard, one of the things that I focused a lot on over the last 5-10 years is helping founders to scale up their businesses. So I'm on the advisory board and have shares in dozens of tech businesses. We've had a number of really great exits. In fact, as one might imagine, sitting in this spot where I'm helping a lot of emerging growth, emerging tech founders, I've gotten immersed in the Web3 space. So I'm in like 15 or 20 different projects right now in the Web3 space, encompassing, of course, NFTs as well. A lot of picks and shovels businesses, invested alongside a number of investors whose names you would know quite well. And one of my most treasured portfolio companies is NFT BAZL. So just thrilled to be a part of it, thrilled to be on the journey with Ori. And I think there's a lot of great things ahead for this business. Last bucket would be family. Most importantly, a wife and 3 kids, and just happy to be here and to talk about NFTs with the two of you.
That's amazing. Well, we're happy to have you, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your perspectives, considering your backgrounds. So as we jump into things, I guess, NFT 2.0, the next generation of NFTs, I think it's a really interesting time to be approaching this topic, considering the current bear market that we've been witnessing. And, you know, a lot of people are speculating whether or not NFTs are a bubble or a fad that's going to pop, or that we're witnessing pop, and that they're not going to last. But I think that one thing that we can all agree on is that moving forwards and transitioning out of this bear market, the NFT landscape as we currently know it is going to be very different. And I'd love to hear some of both of your thoughts on, what are some flaws in the current ecosystem, and what do you hope to see as we transition out into this next phase of NFTs? Maybe Jay, starting with you.
Sure. Well, one thing I would say is I'm old enough to remember Web 1 and what they used to call the internet. The word they used for it was the information superhighway. And that was kind of late 90s, and people looked at it as kind of this cool thing where you can find information, but they weren't too sure if this thing would be scalable or a realistic infrastructure for business moving forward. And of course, it's been proven to be a really, really important factor, the internet in our lives, of course, but only at the time, I remember even in my town strategy business, because I've been in this for a long time, any company, whether they had a product or not, if they put .com after their name, they were on their way to going public, and it was this massive bubble. But, the wheat was separated from the chaff at the end of the day, and very few companies made it out of Web 1, namely Amazon might be one, eBay, but very few, Oracle. And I think we're in this kind of situation right now where Web3 is real. I believe in it very deeply. I think it's the future. There's no question in my mind, including NFTs, as it applies to art and beyond. However, probably 95% of the businesses we're looking at right now won't survive. But I believe NFT BAZL is one of them because it brings a lot of substance to the table, real world drops, a unique NFT marketplace, ongoing innovations, investment grade assets, partnerships with, incredible hotels like SLS. So this is one of the businesses I think will rise. But in a way, the bear market is a good thing because it ends up allowing for the cream to rise to the top and all the noise to go away.
Totally. I agree with that a lot. I think the way Web3 has evolved so far, we're only in the early stages of it. So you're really seeing the NFT projects that have come to market, or let's say 95% of the NFT projects that came to market so far are really projects that are using a JPEG or some kind of very simple image to kind of mask a smart contract. But those smart contracts don't hold that much intrinsic value yet. The big projects that are succeeding now are the projects that have, for example, look at the apes. They've been able to transfer so much value over to their collectors because they're putting something in a smart contract and they're putting it behind a picture of a monkey. The picture is not what's important. It's the value behind that that contract. And something like NFT BAZL, for example, that focuses on heavily is transferring real world utility and value through those tokens. So either whether it be a digital piece of art from an artist that has true provenance, or whether it be metaverse utility or the ability to validate a physical asset using the blockchain, for me at least, that's where you're really seeing an NFT being used for what an NFT should be used for, versus creating drops that are for the sake of having a new profile picture or something on those lines. I don't think the massive value you've seen on the market is truly there. And that's why I keep reusing the term intrinsic value. When the market sinks in NFTs, there's nothing protecting it. There's no this is the end, this is the minimum value this asset can have, because it's just a picture. When you have a true intrinsic value, you limit the downsides quite significantly. You might still have market risk, but you won't have intrinsic risk. And that's something I'm a massive proponent of. And I think that's what will rise once you start seeing this exodus from these generative drops, I think.
Definitely. And I think there's a really important distinction to be made between those generative drops, or to clarify for those of you in our audience who are unfamiliar with the term, when people refer to PFP projects, those are called profile picture projects. And as Ori was saying, those are the types of images that you normally see in people's profile pictures on social media. But maybe, Ori, you could touch a little bit more upon the differences between the two, because I know you work hand in hand at NFT BAZL with traditional artists and help them release their first NFT projects. And more often than not, those are one-of-one projects as opposed to massive generative drops. So if there's anything that you would like to distinguish between the two, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Totally. When we started with NFT BAZL, which was just over a year ago now, we weren't even looking at generative drops. We wanted to just find a way to take a traditional artist and help them use their existing inventory and infrastructure to create value onto an NFT. So the first mission we had is, let's take physical paintings, let's take physical sculptures, assets, and just put a chip on it. That chip will store an NFT inside of it, and then will prove the provenance of the asset because it's been tracked on chain since its initiation. And given that those assets came from us as the initiator, we knew exactly where that piece had been, and we validated it. So we initiated the marketplace as just being kind of a marketplace for data. It was just data on physical assets. And once we had that, and once we started playing with NFTs, we obviously started going into the digital art space. And the digital art was based on the premise that the artist will now have the ability to turn their physical pieces into something that comes to life. So, for example, we have an artist like Paul Rousseau, who is one of our very first artists. And he creates these massive wall sculptures that they look like they're swaying in the wind, or that they're crumpled up pieces of metal or dollar bills. And his very first NFT, which we released in June, was literally just a dollar bill moving in the wind and being thrown around the park, which gave the artist the ability to bring his piece of art to life and show the collectors what was the message or what was the image he had in his head when creating that physical sculpture. So it gave the artists a new medium to start playing with. And with that, once we started playing with the digital space, you start seeing the ability to embed utility in the assets, whether it be meet and greets, or whether it be a membership or early access to the next series of the collection. That's essentially the same thing you're seeing in galleries. When you're a good collector of an art gallery, you typically get re-invited to go and buy the next series from the artist before it gets released to the public. And that's essentially the access we're giving to our collectors, but we're embedding a ton of utility into it because the smart contract can handle it.
Definitely. And utility is a really interesting aspect to explore, which I'd love to look into as well. A question that I often get when people find out that I'm working adjacent to the NFT and the Web3 industry is, how do you value an NFT? And Jay, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on how you would go about doing that, because there's so many aspects that differentiate from the traditional art world. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. One of the things that I do love about NFTs is you can embed real value and real utility within each of these pieces. But in addition to that, on the question of value, one of the cool things I think about NFTs, and it's allowing, I think, artists to experience somewhat of a renaissance, and it's encouraging young people who really want to pursue art as careers, including my daughter, for example. She's right now at a university called OCAD here in Toronto. She's a fantastic painter. She's already getting commissioned projects, and let's say she sells a physical painting for $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever it might be at this stage in her career. The thing about artists prior to this smart contract phenomenon or NFT phenomenon was, if Ali one day becomes famous, that individual who bought the piece of art for $1,000 or $2,000, who knows, one day they might be able to sell it for $1 million. And Ali will not be able to benefit from the augmentation in value. But if you cook into the contract the fact that she gets, a 10% royalty forever from all future purchases, I think it creates a sort of sense of equity for the original starving artist. Even in the music side, for example, I'm not a deep expert in the music space, but the way things are today, roughly speaking, if an artist has a record deal, they'll be giving 80% of their revenues to the record label and keeping 20%. You could flip that in the music space if you were to mint a song as an NFT. And by the way, you'd be more than pleased to share the 20% with those that believed in you early and invested in you, rather than the so-called greedy corporates. So there's a lot that can be done from an equitable point of view. as regards value, even if the initial value is not necessarily high. That's really one of the beautiful things to me about NFTs.
I really do love that point. And it is about empowering the artists and the creators as opposed to, the companies who normally are the platforms that help bring that visibility. And Jay, I would love it if you could later on drop down some of Ali's artwork, and everyone in the audience, if you could go show her some love and support. I personally would love to see some of her work.
If I can technically maneuver that, I'll do that. Otherwise, I'll send it to you offline.
I will definitely help you. There's a little chat on the side if you wanted to.
Cool.
There's a little really audience chat there. But here's a bit more of a personal question that I'd love to ask you guys is, how would you as individuals value an NFT? Like, when you're making an NFT purchase, what is it something that, what characteristics or qualities are you looking for? And this is really where it comes, art is the eye of the beholder. So you can feel free to take any angle at it, but I'm just curious, what is it that you guys individually look for when it comes to buying pieces?
Totally. I think it comes down to a couple of things. One, like you said, it's in the eye of the beholder. It depends which asset class you look at. So if you're looking at a digital piece of art, there isn't that much history on the digital art space. It's only been around for about a year and a half. And the majority of those pieces are not investment grade pieces. So it really comes down to, where do you see the value in that artist being, and how bad do you want that piece? That's what it comes to. And for example, like with NFT BAZL, we've actually brought in a market maker who has the ability to negotiate pricing with buyers and sellers in order to help that price discovery. That protects the creators so that their pieces aren't just sitting on the marketplace stagnant, and also helps buyers discover the right value for that piece. So I think that's a really important thing. The second thing is, if you're looking at NFTs as a form of utility, you have to value how bad you want that access. Like, what is this asset granting you that otherwise you wouldn't be able to get, whether it be like membership to a hotel, or discounted rates, or a reward system with a brand. How much are you going to leverage that asset? And then the third one is in physical assets. Then you're just looking at the historical trading price of that physical asset, and what's the added value of having it trade on chain, whether it come from the provenance, because now you're finally able to prove, let's say you have a collectible pair of sneakers. Now you're able to prove that collectible pair of sneakers are the real pair because they have a chip inside, and they're authenticated using an NFT. Versus before, when you bought that pair of sneakers, you still had the risk that you can't validate the asset. So now you're able to prove that from initiation. So there should be that added value to it using the NFT. So it comes to the eye of the beholder, but I also think it comes down to, what added value does that smart contract add to the physical or the digital asset?
Yeah, I think those are really good points. And Jay, I'm not sure if you had anything that you wanted to add.
Yes, for sure. Well, I mean, to me, art, one purchases art kind of in two buckets, or two kind of ways from a motivational standpoint, and hopefully both. One is as an investment. The other one is, really if it touches your heart, and if it's a piece of art that is a good investment and touches your heart, even better. But there's nothing wrong with each of them exclusively at the same time. One thing I didn't mention in my background is that I've been advocating for women at top levels of the corporate world for 2 decades now. I do a report every year, which I bring in all kinds of influencers and personalities from various walks of life to amplify the discussion. People from Prime Minister Trudeau to Mark Cuban to Sheryl Sandberg to Lisa Milano, and I've committed really to advocating for women at top levels of leadership until hopefully one day I work my way out of a job. So this past year, we partnered with Boss Beauties, which is run by Lisa Mayer, who's been as well years before the NFT space advocating for women in leadership. So our cover page this year was a really beautiful figure designed by Boss Beauties of a woman of color holding a baby with a cap that said CEO. And that really, to me, was near and dear to my heart in so many ways. And the symbolism of it was so beautiful. Another recent purchase that I made was Nyla from Longneckies, a 13-year-old tremendous young artist, has a second series of Longnecky NFTs, and this one is designed specifically to inspire other young women and girls to be artists if that's what they're passionate about. And so, you know, that's kind of a piece that I'm really proud to hold, whether as a long-term investment or simply because it's something that I truly believe in terms of elevating children. Because after all, the future of Web3 and the NFT space is really in our children's hands. So that kind of was really in sync with the things that I care about.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for that insight into, you know, the different types of buyer motivations, whether it be a return of interest or just purely the messaging and the meaning behind a piece. So I'm going to kind of flip it from buyer motivations now to creator motivations and what would encourage a creator to get involved in the space. And I'm going to kind of just broadly segment this into retail versus institutional, retail being more individual creators and then institutional referring to bigger brands and companies. And so Ori, I'd love to ask you about, you know, the retail and the individual creators since you work with artists. And then Jay, afterwards, I'm going to ask you about the brands and companies and what would motivate them to get involved with NFTs and engage with that technology. So Ori, starting with you.
Sure. I think the main thing, especially in the art world, something that I've learned a lot of recently is that by being able to leverage decentralized technology, there's no more gatekeepers into the world of distribution, really, into getting your art in front of the right investors, or even having the opportunity to showcase your asset. Whether you be a sculptor, an artist, a shoemaker, a fashion brand, whatever it is, there's no longer these gatekeepers preventing creators to get in front of people and to showcase their stuff. Whereas in the traditional world, even if you looked a couple years back, if you were an artist and you wanted to get your art up in a gallery in New York, it's extremely, extremely difficult. You have to go through a lot of work. You have to get a lot of provenance behind you. And no matter how talented you are, if you're not playing the political game correctly, you're not going to get in. And we've, like with NFT BAZL, we've managed to onboard so many artists that were amazing talents, who otherwise no one would have ever even heard of. There was a point a couple months back when we recruited an artist from England. We created her first pieces of digital art. We took the physical pieces, put a chip on them, and authenticated 2 physical and 2 digital pieces for her. We took them to an exhibition. No one had heard her name before, and they were really cool, funky pieces. Unfortunately, no one took them. But a couple months later, she was scooped up by one of the biggest galleries in the world, and was called one of the most talented artists of our generation. And because we were able to showcase her earlier works, we gave like the collectors on the NFT BAZL market the first access to that. Where now, if you want to buy that piece, you're going to be paying like close to 30 times more than what we had it listed at, because we got them in early. We gave that early access, and we didn't say no to a talented artist because they weren't represented by a big gallery at that point. So we democratized that entire marketplace. We're bringing talent and investment grade assets to the forefront without limiting the creators, and honestly giving creators the tools that it takes to get them in front of the right people. We're showing artists how to work with graphics, how to work with 3D displays, how to even embed the smart contract with utility. Like we have photographers that we've worked with who have embedded tickets to join the photographer on his next trip to South Africa in that smart contract. So as soon as you buy that piece of photography, you're actually getting a trip out of it. So it gives the artists a lot more creative freedom, and also the ability to get in front of potential investors long term from a much earlier stage.
Amazing. Thank you. And I'm just going to hop in here and let everyone in our audience know that we do have an auction on a specific NFT BAZL piece by an artist named Joseph. And that auction is going to end at the end of this summit, where we're going to reveal who the winner was. So I will drop a link to our marketplace for you guys to check it out. And Jay, I'm going to shift this over to you and ask you about the motivations as to why an institutional or a company or brand would want to get involved in the space and maybe drop an NFT or an NFT collection. So if you wanted to take that away.
Sure. Well, I just think in the very least that corporations and brands need to study this phenomenon and not be ignorant to it, because like in my town strategy business, I'm speaking to chief technology officers of multi-billion-dollar corporations. And in some cases, they've never even heard of NFTs. So my first thing is they should at least investigate and learn and understand this a little bit. A friend of mine is head of digital for KPMG, and he's gotten into it a little bit. And I was proud to see, for example, they bought a World of Women PFP. So at least they're getting into it somewhat, and they're able to, from a marketing standpoint, brand the fact that diversity and inclusion is an important piece for them. But there's so much more a large corporation can do. We saw Starbucks announce a couple of weeks ago that they're beginning to enter the NFT space. We see shoe companies like Adidas getting into it. Ori mentioned tickets. I believe the future of ticketing will be in the NFT space, and there's so much utility that can be embedded, as Ori mentioned, into these NFTs. One example, I remember, I don't know, a number of months ago, Drake and Kanye West got together again after having a bit of a cold relationship a little while back. For those who care about hip hop and hip hop culture, if those tickets were sold, let's say, as NFTs, 10 years from now, that thing might be a collector's item. If the right smart contract was embedded into it, which someone can profit from. So there's so many different ways I think corporations can get involved. Of course, I was talking to a cannabis business as an example. They're looking to buy real estate in the metaverse and be able to make retail sales as people are in the metaverse, because it's the merging of, let's say, two cultures of individuals who, a lot of them have their feet in both worlds. So, it's a perfect marriage potentially. But this is the future. And I think the sooner that large corporations understand and recognize that, the better off they'll be. And they'll be looked at as pioneers if they jump in at this early stage.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And I know you mentioned a bunch of different topics there, ticket and NFTs and so many different industries. And I mean, we could dive individually into each and every one of those. I'm just going to name a few. There's sports memorabilia, there's collectibles, there's digital fashion, there's playable games. So I'd love to ask each of you, which is your favorite industry that you're looking forward to seeing tapping into the NFT and Web3 space, and what you're hoping to see develop. So maybe Ori, if you wanted to start off.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's massive opportunity in the corporate space, mostly because the NFT now gives corporates and creators the ability to transfer over value to their client base that they weren't otherwise able to transfer over. So for example, like fashion brands, I think there's a huge opportunity in the fashion space now to bridge physical and digital assets and have them utilize metaverses as a form of marketing for themselves. Something I've been pushing on quite a bit lately with the whole NFT BAZL team is metaverse fashion, and tying that to real world fashion. So first off, being able to validate a physical piece of clothing and proving its authenticity. Once you prove the authenticity of a physical asset, imagine adding a layer of augmented reality to that physical piece. And that augmented reality essentially showing you what is visible in the metaverse. And then in the metaverse, you're able to interact with that piece of clothing, and you're able to utilize it in multiple different ways. And that's also going to lean into video games and skins and so on. I think that's a really big space. And with New York Fashion Week coming up, I think we have a really big opportunity there. And that's with real world fashion brands, not purely digital fashion. Another big opportunity, I think, is with choreography and dancers. That's something we've been working on quite a bit lately. We actually are starting to work with our first a ballet dancer now. But using the intellectual property from a dancer's choreography and actually capturing that movement, locking it into a smart contract and being able to use it, A, as a piece of art, and B, as a tool in the metaverse, I think is really fantastic. Again, that gives now a dancer a brand new stream of revenue and also a new way to interact with their fans and their collectors. Those are all things we're working on actively, and the main point of that is really just to bring as much value to creators as possible, helping them transfer over their IP really, and helping buyers understand that marketplace as much as possible by making it tangible and simple to use.
Yeah, that's so fascinating, especially that dance point, because I think that's something that was previously unimaginable, to have that intellectual property over a choreography. I mean, imagine all of those TikTok dances that we see go viral. And if the person who initially started that could actually collect the royalties from having invented that move. So I encourage everyone in the audience to maybe comment and drop down what are some of your favorite types of NFT projects in different spaces that we might have not heard about. And Jay, I'm going to shoot the same question back to you. What kind of spaces are you looking forward to seeing develop?
Well, one comment I would make is the connection between real world and digital world is one that I think is super, super important, not segmenting the two. And that's one of the things I love so much about NFT BAZL. They get that, and they have the access and the content to actually follow through on that. The fashion space, I think, is the next big frontier in the NFT space. So I'm really, really bullish in that area, just as Ori is. And I have a number of other friends who are cooking some things up very quietly behind the scenes when it comes to the fashion space. But really, gaming is really big today, but I think it's only going to get bigger. And the native gamers, such as my kids, they just get this so intuitively. I mean, skins existed, way before 2 or 3 years ago when all this NFT hype was happening. So the intersection of gaming and NFTs, I think, is going to get only bigger and bigger.
Definitely. Yeah. Super cool. Super cool. So, Ori, I know that NFT BAZL is in the process of doing a Series A, and I'm wondering, what can we expect to see from you guys moving forwards within the next couple of months to a year?
I think there's a ton. Raising capital in the space is honestly, it's given us an opportunity to now start developing smart contracts that have way more utility in them. Until this date, most NFTs are composed of one simple smart contract, and they transfer over a limited amount of information or utility in them. We're working on now trying to create smart contracts that are specialized for every industry, for every group, and asset class as well. So, for example, the fashion NFTs, there's going to be much more embedded in it than just a physical and a digital wearable. We're working on smart contracts that are going to be able to bring a lot more value to the collector, to the seller as well, and also to there's one question in the comment section. There will be the ability to earn using these kind of NFTs, but not the same way you would have seen as with an airdrop, like is done on OpenSea. But we're trying to avoid conflict of any kind of securities law. And in order to do that, we need to structure a very smart contract to do that. We're developing solutions for corporates. A big push of ours since our launch of the SLS hotels has been with hotel brands, really trying to create and curate exclusive clubs for hotel brands. So just as we've done with the SLS, they have their members club, but now they're also embedding the NFT club, and that's going to grant specific access, utility within the hotels, access to amenities that otherwise only residences would be able to access, and so on. And we're curating all the visuals to match the aesthetic of the brands. We're hoping to work with airlines, car manufacturers to authenticate the physical asset, and bring those into the Web3 space. And honestly, the main goal for us for the next year is to help the creators find as many solutions as possible. We're not trying to make as many drops as we physically can. I think the goal for the next few years, especially as the market is pretty unstable and quite volatile right now, is trying to find where the intrinsic value lies across sectors. Once we do that, then we can expand. Then we can start doing drops in mass. But I think the goal right now is help creators discover what they can create.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I really think from the start of watching this industry develop, or your head has been in the next generation of NFT 2.0 from the start. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how that pans out. We are unfortunately running low on time. So I'm just going to ask you guys if you have any final thoughts or comments of what you hope to see in the future. Jay, if you wanted to provide any final thoughts.
So my one thought would be don't get caught up in the hype. Follow the projects that actually have real substance. That's super, super important. And what I've done mostly, as I said at the beginning of the discussion, is really invest in the infrastructure of the business, the platforms that you feel will really bring great value over the long haul, rather than getting caught up in the pumps and dumps. But hopefully in this bear market, there's always a silver lining in everything that happens, whether markets are up or down. And hopefully that washes out a lot of the unfounded hype, and the future will be bright. I know it will be over the long haul.
Agreed. Ori, any final thoughts?
Yeah. No, I think we're in such an early stage. We're looking at the first iterations of what NFTs are right now. And every time there's a market correction, I think that's when you double down. But you don't double down on projects. You double down on the infrastructure, on what is the foundation of this industry, what is building up all the base levels, and invest yourself in there. I don't think we should be buying into the fluff now. I don't think we should be trying to scoop up all the NFTs that have collapsed. I think the opposite. I think now is when you start seeing what makes a project succeed and what were the underlying factors in that project that caused that. And yeah, like Jay said, don't get caught up by FOMO. I think if you're investing in something, invest in it because you're passionate about it or because you truly see the value. Don't invest in it because you see everyone else jumping into it. If you can't justify it to yourself, you can't justify it at all. And that would be my main thing. I think the next 2 to 3 years for the space are going to be awesome. I think you're going to see a lot of aggressive growth patterns and then collapses as people make too many mistakes. And I think that's normal. But that's what creates a ton of opportunity for people creating infrastructure.
Definitely. I think those are all really, really amazing tips, especially considering the markets right now. And I guess I'll close things off on a bit more of a fun note. My last question for you guys is, if there's one item in your current possession which you could turn into an NFT, what would it be and why?
That's such a good question. I would love to authenticate my watches. I don't have many, but I think the ability to chip a watch or to validate the authenticity and be able to watch the valuation change on the market would be really cool.
Awesome. And Jay, how about you?
I would say all the beautiful cards that my wife and 3 kids have made for me for my birthdays and Father's Days. That would be the most precious commodity for me.
I think for me, it would be my university degree, because when I moved recently, I thought that I lost it and I panicked because it was the only proof that I've ever graduated. So if we could see some like online or virtual NFT diplomas, I think that would be a really awesome thing to keep a hold of. But yeah, I guess that's it for today. We've ran out of time. If you guys wanted to drop your contacts, some people are asking how to get in touch with you in the audience chat to the right-hand side of our screen. But other than that, thank you so much for joining me. It's been such a pleasure moderating for the two of you. And yeah, great to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Tali.
Talk to you soon, Ori.
See you guys.
Bye.